So it turns out Jacob Rees-Mogg is now an influencer, which is a sentence I never thought I'd ever have to say. He now has a YouTube channel with 140 YouTube subscribers, where he does like Dennis Prager style fart side chats in front of his bookshelves because he's oh so smart, wouldn't you know? The man who had to look up Latin phrases in a Latin dictionary to pretend to say them that he knew them to sound smart, pretending that he knew who the Borgias were so that he could compare people to them because he'd seen them on Wikipedia, because this guy is basically like a fake Victorian, which is quite funny. But regardless, he is a YouTuber now. He hath become the YouTuber, the haunted Victorian pencil. And he has done a video called Why the Greens Are So Dangerous. And it has the tagline, the Green Party is no longer the party of cuddly tree huggers. And it just shows you these people don't know what the fuck they're talking about, as the Green Party hasn't changed. We are just saying the things we've already said before, with a much louder voice and a more combative political tone. But let's see what he has to say about the dangerous nature of the Green Party.
Green, not red, is for danger. Those of you who remember Fireman Sam, which I used to watch with some of my children, will recall that they would have Red is for Danger being sung, and then Fireman Sam would come to the rescue. But now it's green that is for danger. Green, that colour normally associated either with envy or with naivety, is the dangerous colour in British politics. It's dangerous because it's so little known. It's dangerous because of what underlies that nice, fluffy, intellectual image. The Greens of today, the Greens of Zach Polanski, are not the Greens of Caroline Lucas.
I mean, this is just factually untrue. Now, I spend time on Threads. It's bad, but in a way that Twitter is not bad. Is totally different to Twitter in that, rather being populated entirely by right-wing nutjobs, it's entirely populated by Starmerites. For some inexplicable reason, Threads is entirely infested with people who think that Keir Starmer can do no wrong. It's basically a cult. And in my time on Threads, the amount of people who I've seen have said basically the same sentence of, oh, all of that hard work that Caroline Lucas did has been ruined by the populist Zach Polanski, is essentially been said by people who haven't got a fucking clue what they're talking about, because the Greens have not changed. Our politics have not changed in that time. So, for people who don't know, I have only ever voted Labour once. It was in 2019. It's the only Labour vote I've ever done. I voted Green in 2015 and 2017, and of course in 2024 as well. And I did this because they've always been a left-wing party. They've always been a party that cared about internationalism, that cared about social justice, that cared about cooperative and socialist economics. I mean, Caroline Lucas herself describes herself as a socialist. She was doing the things that Corbyn was doing in terms of supporting those policies on a party political level, because she was the leader before Corbyn was. Before all of that happened in 2016 to 2019. The idea that somehow the Green Party were only ineffectual environmentalists up until Zach Polanski became the leader is ahistorical nonsense. Polanski doesn't set policy. Green Party members set policy, and the Green Party have opposed capitalist economics for a while, for a long time. Like, Natalie Bennett really was kind of the person who was in charge of the party when they became a lot more radical on the economy, but these have all happened as votes in conference, significantly before Zach Polanski. The idea that those changes are after Caroline Lucas and not before Caroline Lucas shows you how little these people pay attention, which is why these people will say shit like, oh, I just miss the days of Caroline Lucas, because they don't miss the days of the Green Party not being radical, because they already were radical. They miss the days of them being ineffective. Because as much as I agree with Caroline Lucas's politics, as much as I agree with the kind of politics the Greens have already espoused up until this point, given that I voted for them twice, they were not politically relevant because they didn't pull the kind of electoral engagement that is necessary to be a heavy player in politics. It is bringing the fire of populism. It is bringing the fight to the other parties rather than just playing nicey-nicey that has gotten the Green Party to second in the polls on 21%, whilst meaningfully changing very little about their policy because Zach Polanski does not set that policy. It's all the same policy, only a couple of changes, like we're pro-HS2 now and we have an abolished landlords motion, right? Like, there are some other policy changes that have been different, of course, but broadly, the scope of the policy prospectus that the Green Party offers has not changed in a meaningful sense since Caroline Lucas was in charge. Caroline is disgusted by Starmer and is still hugely supportive of Zach and the party she is a member of. Like, Caroline Lucas literally recorded a live episode of Bold Politics with Zach Polanski just a couple of weeks ago. The idea that Caroline Lucas and Zach Polanski are somehow differing in their politics is nonsense. It's total nonsense. They both support the policy prospectus. They're both socialists. They're both progressives. They just have a different approach to parliamentary politics. And of course, both conservatives like Jacob Rees-Mogg and liberals like Starmerites don't actually care about the substance of politics or policy. They care about vibes. Caroline Lucas is good vibes because she's nicey-nicey. Zach Polanski is bad vibes because he's a bad populist. Populism bad. Oh, populism bad. Which, populism to them just means people who campaign in a more direct fashion, rather than what it actually is, which is a rhetorical strategy of appealing to the people versus the elites. Which, if you are a socialist, if you are somebody who the Labour Party is supposed to represent, you should be a populist. Socialism is a populist ideology. People versus the elites, the proletariat versus the bourgeois, that is classic socialism. The idea of non-populist socialism is a liberal creation. Which is why, of course, liberals love Starmer and hate populism and hate Zach Polanski. Because again, they don't care about socialism, they don't care about socialist politics, they do not care about policy, they care about vibes. Even Briefcase Ramsey is on the same page as Polanski after the leadership challenge. Everyone seems on board. Well, that's the thing. We saw from the debate between Ramsey and Polanski on LBC, the very funny one where Ramsey refused to say he liked Zach Polanski. Even they both agreed during the debate that the discussion wasn't about policy, it was about rhetoric and strategy. Because even Adrian Ramsey, who I describe as a briefcase because of his approach to politics, does that make him not a socialist? Does that make him not in support of the Green Party's policies? No, he's in support of those policies that we all support. It wasn't a debate on policy, it was a debate on strategy. And obviously Zach won, and Zach was correct.
Caroline Lucas, serious-minded, earnest, worthy, intellectual.
Words mean nothing. This means nothing.
Zach Polanski, populist, irresponsible, dangerous. And because people haven't noticed the change, they still think of the Greens as having their nice little beards and wearing their sandals with socks, as not being a fundamentally threatening body, that it's a safe protest vote in local elections or in general elections. But it's not. The Green Party is dangerous in terms of its domestic approach and in terms of its international approach and in terms of its cultural approach. Let's deal with those in turn.
And what I'm going to do is make the case, A, for why everything he's saying that is bad about the Green Party is good. I'm also going to make the case as to why he is insane for saying that this is somehow a new development. Because again, these policies already existed before, under the previous tree-hugging, sandals-with-socks era, as they still do during the Zach Polanski populist dangerous era, you know?
Internationally, the Greens want to abolish our nuclear deterrent and to leave NATO. We are living in a world that is more dangerous than it has been at any.
I mean, first of all, this isn't true on the NATO point. The current policy is to try and reform NATO from within, and if that is impossible, to seek alternative defence arrangements. And that is the position, which is that we don't necessarily want to leave NATO, but now that we've seen that NATO is not able to be reformed under Donald Trump, we should seek alternative arrangements with Europe. Most European countries that are defensively powerful are already members of NATO. It would be changing to a defense regime that is in Europe's benefit rather than America's benefit. This is part of de-Yankification, the current strategy that we're employing. But the idea that there's a Green Party policy to unilaterally leave NATO immediately isn't true. The members passed a policy to become NATO agnostic rather than anti-NATO, although we do believe in denuclearization. And again, it is our hand-in-glove nature with the American administration and with NATO that has made us a target in this war. We have become a target for people like Hezbollah, people like Iran, in response to our relationship with the United States, which is part of our relationship with NATO that has made us less safe. It is Cypriots now who are in danger of being attacked, not because they have any involvement themselves in America's war, but they are intimately tied to it by having British bases on their soil. That is not NATO protection that they are getting. They have become a target because of NATO and because NATO has engaged almost entirely in belligerent invasions rather than in what it is supposed to be engaging, which is defense, for the last 30 years or so.
Any time since the end of the Cold War. A world in which Russia and China are threats to peace.
I mean, China isn't a threat to peace. Russia is a threat to peace, but it's a threat to peace through hybrid warfare when it comes to countries like the UK. They're not going to be invading the UK anytime soon. They can barely make their way through Ukraine, given the difference in sizes of military expenditure between Russia and Ukraine. The fact that they have taken so long to get as far as they have done in Ukraine shows that what is coming up to a 4-year-long war has become a quagmire rather than the lightning war that they're expecting, thereby weakening them as a threat to other Western nations. They are proven to be somewhat of a paper tiger in that regard, even if they are causing huge death and destruction that should be resisted. You know? The idea that they're a threat to France and Germany and to the United Kingdom is just total nonsense. We've seen that they can't even get through Ukraine, who are very underarmed up until that point. You know? China, on the other hand, they're a threat to nobody. How many wars have China started outside of Tibet? You can criticize their internal politics as much as you want, and I do criticize their internal politics. But the idea that they're somehow a belligerent nation who are a threat to world peace is literally total nonsense. Complete nonsense. They're the ones trying to maintain global stability at a time when America is a threat to world peace, because they're the ones causing ecocide in Iran and funding Israel's genocide in Gaza. And it's Israel's genocide in Gaza has upended the global world order, because essentially every country in the global south knows that they have no reason to follow the UN Charter anymore because Israel doesn't do it. It's no longer being seen as a way of normalizing conflict. It's seen as a way of being able to import power upon the global north. And the genocide in Gaza has exposed it, because Israel have faced basically no repercussions for it.
Already active in having attacked Ukraine and remaining a serious threat to its neighbours. Is that the time to wind down NATO, an alliance that has protected Europe, protected the world in truth, for decades since the...
NATO protect Libya? Doesn't look very safe now, does it? Manchester bomber was trained by MI6 and sent to Libya and radicalised there and came back to do terrorism in our country. We are less safe because of NATO invasions across the world. Reprisals, blowback from invasions by NATO have caused the terrorism that we see on domestic shores to this day. If we had kept our nose out of other countries' business, if we hadn't destabilised huge parts of the world by creating power vacuums through stupid interventions this guy's fucking supports in Iran as well, we would not be the target that we are today. The idea that it makes us more safe rather than less safe is nonsense.
Second World War. Or is it in fact a time when we need to upgrade our defence capabilities? As the last week or so has shown us, we are embarrassingly weak in terms of our naval ability to protect British assets and interests and people overseas. We need more, not less, and we need the strength of that alliance that has served us so well, that won the Cold War and protects us now the Cold War has ended, from these increasing threats. So
now, those threats have come because of our NATO membership and because of NATO's belligerence overseas. This is nonsense. This is ahistorical nonsense.
Leaving NATO is folly. And the nuclear deterrent. No one wants nuclear weapons to be used. Of course they don't. That's a rather trite statement of the obvious. But the deterrent effect is fundamental. Why can Donald Trump attack Iran but not North Korea? It's because North Korea has a nuclear bomb. And it's why it was so important to stop Iran getting a nuclear bomb, because then it would have been unassailable.
No, it shows that they were correct to want to build the nuclear bomb by your own logic. It's been shown by you to be building nuclear weapons because America do want to invade them, because America is the imperial power here, which is what NATO has been used for over and over and over again, which is why we get the blowback in the first place. Again, I have some skepticism of the denuclearization strategy. Again, I think that it's mostly there to be able to prevent a ground invasion, which I don't think we're at any risk of. Even by his own logic, he's undermining his position. So we have to stop Iran getting a nuclear bomb. No, This shows that nuclear weapons were a correct thing for Iran to want to pursue, if your logic is correct, because America and Israel always wanted to invade.
As long as we have nuclear weapons, we are de facto unassailable. It is our final line of defense. And we went through all these arguments in the 1980s. Unilateral nuclear disarmament is basically a surrender policy, an utter weakening of the nation. So they would make us weak internationally, of less consequence, and they would undermine that fundamental duty of any government if they were to be in control of defence of the realm, because it doesn't matter what your health policy is if your country's been taken over by somebody else.
But again, no one wants to invade us. I think it's worth pointing out, by the way, no one wants to invade our country. That is not happening. And we also have incredibly strong conventional defence. All of this nonsense that we're getting from the right wing at the moment about our hugely weak defence because we don't spend enough, we're only spending 2.4% of GDP. I'm like, we spend over the amount that we are required to by NATO membership. We only spend slightly less as a percentage of GDP on the military than the United States of America does, have the biggest military in the world, right? We already spend plenty on defence. We have plenty of conventional defence. We should probably spend our money more efficiently and not use private companies, subcontracted for all this dumb shit, which has become a massive rort for the private friends of the Uniparty. And we should be investing more in cybersecurity, which we are lax at. The idea that our conventional defence isn't good enough, given, as we've pointed out many times, we have bases all around the world, in the Chagos Islands, which we're now going to be renting back from Mauritius, or indeed in Cyprus, as we have known about for the last few days. Plenty of conventional defence. The idea that we need nuclear weapons, especially if we are part of some kind of defensive alliance, whether it's NATO, as he seems to want to, or an alternative arrangement with Europe, the idea that anyone is invading us is nonsense. We're an island nation. We're a rich island nation with plenty of military capability. Knowing is invading us, it's nonsense. And, as I pointed out earlier, he's trying to make this video to say, well, the Greens aren't necessarily the tree-hugging party of the past. I'm like, the previous policy was unilateral exit from NATO. The original policy was to leave NATO immediately. It is since Denya and Adrian Ramsey were the leaders that the vote was passed at conference to change the policy from leaving NATO to becoming NATO agnostic. Our policies, since Caroline Lucas up until today, have become more pro-NATO than they were previously. Against my personal opinions, by the way. I do not like NATO for plenty of reasons. But just to point to the facts here, is that he's trying to make this video to explain to people why the Greens are worse than they were under Caroline Lucas, when they've actually come closer to his position since then. Conventional defense is fantastic. What goons like Rees-Mogg want is conventional offense with global reach, which is far more challenging and expensive. Exactly. Like, these people, when they talk about wanting to upgrade our defense, as you've pointed out, they want to upgrade our offense and become an imperial power once again. It's why they're so mad about the Chagos deal, because they believe we have a divine fucking right to islands that were never ours in the first place because we conquered them as part of the empire ages ago.
So, abroad, internationally, in terms of defence, their policy is feckless. Some of them have mourned the death of an Ayatollah who ordered the deaths.
No, that's no evidence for that. That's just a lie.
Of some of his own citizens, who allowed people in Iran to be massacred when they asked for freedom. Some of them have mourned the death of such a man. That tells...
I mean, you support Donald Trump, who kills his own citizens. Why the fuck should we listen to your opinions on the civil rights of other nations and people and leaders overseas? You literally support a man who murders his own citizens, Jacob. And again, there's no evidence of anybody in the Greens supporting the Ayatollah. It's just total nonsense.
Tells you where they are. They loathe Israel, and they have been sympathetic to an Ayatollah. This is...
Again, there's no evidence of being sympathetic to the Ayatollah. Do we hate Israel? Damn fucking right we do. Yeah, we hate the genociders of Israel, as everybody should.
I think, deeply concerning about where they would position us internationally. Domestically, they talk less about their green policies than they used to, But their green policies nonetheless remain ruinously expensive. They want net zero by 2040 rather than 2050, but net zero is unachievable anyway, and the rest of the world isn't doing it.
I mean, they are doing it. They are. That's just a lie. Obviously, the Americans have turned tail on this because Donald Trump cares far more about squeezing the last bits of revenue out of the declining oil industry and is starting wars to help increase the price of that oil for corporate profits against the interests of citizens both of his country and indeed the world. But most other countries are moving towards renewable energy. There are plenty of countries who have already reached much higher goals when it comes to divestment from fossil fuels. You look at France's nuclear capability. You look at Norway when it comes to hydroelectric power. You look at hydroelectric power in Australia. They're also increasing their green energy production. The idea that somehow we are the only people doing net zero is just a lie. China, as a country, produced more photovoltaic capacity in 2025 than America has produced in its entire existence put together. The idea that it's somehow only us and nobody else that's engaging in environmentally friendly divestment from fossil fuels is just total nonsense. And we have to pay a lot for energy because we still rely on gas to produce our fossil fuels energy, which is increasing in price because of global conflict. And on top of this, we haven't invested in storage, which your government divested from. And on top of this, we have totally privatized energy, which your party was responsible for. It is the Conservative Party who sold off not only our oil fields, which we could have built a sovereign wealth fund or funded clean energy like the Norwegians did, but also it means that we have to pay high energy bills for Centrica's profits, for all of the profits of the National Grid Company, for all of the profits of the energy suppliers, as well as all of the profits for the energy generation companies as well. Whereas if this was publicly owned, we would be able to sell it to the public at the cost to the Treasury. That was your policy to make our energy expensive. That is your fault. You were in charge.
To bring it forward by 10 years would cost hundreds of billions of pounds extra. And they want to raise money by a wealth tax, which would leave the remaining people who have any money in this country to leave. Wealth taxes,
I mean, that's worked in Norway. This is a lie.
Are a failed method of extracting funds. It's failed across the world. Most countries that
I mean, no, it's not failed in Norway. You're just wrong.
Introduced them have withdrawn them, and their expenditure policies are unwise. They want to increase benefits by £40 a week. It's very easy to be generous with other people's money, but where's that money coming from? They want a minimum wage of £15 an hour. Where's the money for that coming from when businesses, hospitality...
Profits. It's coming from profits, i.e. the stolen wages of the proletariat. Keep up. But when it comes to welfare benefits, that's what the taxation increase is for. It costs that much to increase the welfare state, by the way. You can just slightly increase taxes and get a better welfare state. And those people will spend their extra wages and they'll spend their higher benefits in the shops that then pay those higher wages. The idea that somehow this is going to be economically deleterious rather than the opposite is nonsense, because the people who consume the most are welfare beneficiaries and people on lower wages.
Closing down at the moment because they can't afford the current level of the minimum wage, let alone a further penal increase.
I mean, it's mostly business rates that's really increased their cost. The minimum wage rises haven't increased the overall expenditure for these businesses as much. It is mostly the increase in business rates, which is tied to rents. That's a real problem for businesses. It is the commercial rents they have to pay. But you don't see Jacob Rees-Mogg bemoaning the landlords of this country, the corporate landlords that are gouging small businesses for every penny and sending that money off to fucking bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Which is the real parasitic force upon small businesses in this country, rather than the money that goes into the wages for the people who then buy their products. That puts money into the economy, not taking the money out, which is what the landlords are doing.
So their domestic economic policies would be bad for us. But economic policies come and economic policies go. I think the current government's economic policies are a failure. But perhaps the worst thing about the Greens is their culture, the approach to culture that they would take. This is the legalisation of drugs, the legalisation of prostitution.
It's already legal. Prostitution is already legal. What the fuck are you talking about? Sex workers can operate in this country on a legal basis. Like, there are ways to do it illegally, but there are also ways to do it legally. What we want is decriminalisation of prostitution, of sex work, which is the real word for it, like it's people who work in the sex industry. We would like it to be decriminalised so that people who engage in it are not treated like criminals. Because the current system that we have for legally engaging in sex work has lots of pitfalls where you may end up inadvertently being treated as a pimp by the government for sharing a house with a sex worker, for example. It's incredibly difficult to navigate, and the difficulty that it is to navigate is harmful for sex workers. It doesn't harm clients, because the clients aren't the ones who are being punished by the government for trying to engage in what they're doing. There are certain types of sex work that it's illegal to consume, that you do get punished for as a consumer. But in most cases, the people most at risk from criminalisation or from the ways in which that we have made certain ways in which you do sex work to have illegal elements in it, it's always, always, always the sex workers that end up on the wrong end of it and not the clients. Which is why I support decriminalisation, because the Nordic model that criminalises clients is also bad for the same reasons. And in fact, it's worse for sex workers, as they then get placed in more dangerous situations because it's the clients themselves who then become a danger to the sex workers rather than the sex workers being in danger of the state. And in terms of drug legalization, we've had this argument a million times already ever since this became a bugbear for the political and media class in this country. And it's just brass-eye scaremongering. When you actually look at the results from Portugal, they've been very positive.
And a very soft attitude towards immigration, asylum seeking, and illegal aliens in this country. I don't want a society in which primary school pupils are taught about the safe use of drugs. I think drugs are a scourge on society.
I mean, no one disagrees that there are harmful negative externalities to drug consumption. That has not gone away by making them illegal. People will look at failed drug policy of decades and decades and go, yeah, you want to keep everything the same, actually? Oh, you want to do something about it? That's student politics. That's going to be a terrible scourge on society. I'm like, this is the only solution that we've got now because the war on drugs has massively failed. It's also worth pointing out, I didn't actually go back and talk about the fact that his talk about economic policies, about wealth taxes and increases in welfare spending, all that kind of malarkey, again, that was all policy when Caroline Lucas was leader. We've always supported higher taxes for the rich. We've always supported higher welfare payments. We've always supported better rights for workers. That was in the political perspectives of Caroline Lucas when she was leader. The idea that it is manifestly different now under Zach Polanski is nonsense. It's untrue.
Destroy lives, they ruin lives, they create huge funding for criminal enterprises, and we should enforce the laws.
They create revenue for criminal enterprises, do they, Jacob? Why there might be such a demand for the criminal gangs themselves, given how successful the war on drugs has been? So confused. If anyone would like to explain to me like I'm 12, how on earth there is such demand for the criminal gangs, given how successful the war on drugs has been? Answers on a postcard, chat.
Better than we currently do. The mental health consequences of taking cannabis are very well known, and Peter Hitchens has written about this many times. Allowing drugs, including crack cocaine, to be available and not illegal.
And again, by treating these as health issues, you avoid the addiction traps that these drugs cause when they are illegal, and people are scared to go to the authorities to be able to clean up because they fear being arrested. That is a huge problem. That is a huge problem. We want regulation. We want these things regulated and have proper dispensaries. That is the whole point. You try and take people out of the hands of criminal gangs by treating it as a public health issue, and you get people out of the cycle of addiction. It's worked in Portugal. It can work here.
Is utterly irresponsible and would change the culture of our nation from one where we absolutely emphasise liberty and the freedom of the individual to one of complete licence and anarchy. It is essentially an anarchic policy. Likewise, with prostitution, women should be free to walk the streets without feeling that they might be propositioned. Making prostitution easier risks making the country more dangerous and undermine.
There's just no evidence for this. This is just nonsense. This is total nonsense. Somehow the idea that women are going to get propositioned for sex work on the street if this stuff is decriminalized. Again, it is legal in some situations to engage in sex work. The idea that somehow these people are going to be solicited as fucking civilians on the street if Green Party policy on decriminalisation is passed into law is nonsensical. This is fucking ridiculous. Why do people treat this man as if he's some authority on anything, just because he's got a posh-ass voice, right? What the fuck is going on here? And again, he says makes the streets dangerous. No, the streets are dangerous for sex workers now because they're treated as criminals in some cases, because it's really difficult to be able to follow the very, very strict set of guidelines that you have to engage in if you want to be able to do sex work legally. That is what is dangerous. If you do the Nordic model, it's even more dangerous for the sex workers because of what the clients might do to them to preserve their anonymity because they are them criminals. The only way of ensuring safety for sex workers, and indeed safety for people who've been trafficked, is by making sex work legal, is by making it decriminalised. It's so easy to traffic people because they're in the hands of the gangs that makes it easy to be able to avoid the authorities because they can't afford to go to the authorities in case they are seen as being engaging in something that might be seen as illegal.
Its moral fibre. There are very few people who think that prostitution is a good thing in and of itself.
I mean, sex work is fine. It's just work. It deserves protection, just like every kind of work does. The people deserve rights who are doing it. I have plenty of friends who are sex workers. Both people who've done it online, people who've been pro-doms, people who've been FSFWs. Like, I know plenty of people who've done plenty of different kinds of sex, and they should be respected for what they choose to do. Some of them enjoy it. Some of them do it actively because they enjoy it. And you know what? Anyone who disrespects them can catch these hands. This is what happens when you let conservatives set policy. All utility gets thrown out the window. All idea of trying to craft policy to create positive utility gets immediately discarded, and all they care about is moralizing. That the law isn't there to be able to serve some kind of utilitarian end. The law is there to dictate morals of society, which it never has been. That's never been the case with the law. It's always been there to be able to create positive utility in terms of how those policies are carried out. It's like people who want abortion to be illegal must somehow realise that it doesn't stop abortions from happening, it just makes them less safe. The same is true of drugs, the same is true of sex work. You just make people less safe for doing it. But they don't care about the negative utility for sex workers, for people more broadly, or for people who are addicted to drugs. They don't care about these people at all, or the utility of the policy. They only care about the fact that they don't like the fact it gives them bad feels rather than an actual real effective policy. It's literally feels over reals. It gives them bad feels to know that the government is seen to be permissive of things they view as morally indefensible. They don't like sex work, they don't like drugs, therefore they want the government to reify their moral opposition to these things through policy, rather than follow policy that reaches a utilitarian end. And it's because conservative policy is not serious. They do not care about what policy does, they only care about what it makes them feel like. And worth pointing out, like everything else he's talked about in this video, this was already Green Party policy. This is already Green Party policy. It precedes Zach Polanski, it precedes Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey. It is all the way back from Sean Berry, from Caroline Lucas, Natalie Bennett, era Green Party politics. The idea that this is a new development is nonsense.
Even if they wouldn't criminalise it any further. And then you get immigration. This country's already had much too much immigration. And I know the Tories have to take responsibility for this, and I know I was in a Tory Parliament for 14 years, so I accept my own share of the blame, though I argued against increased immigration on various occasions, both as a backbencher and as a minister. But leaving that to one side, having a system where immigrants illegally here can work straight away will just attract more of them. the pull factors will increase. Providing them with easier housing will increase the pull factors. If you are thinking, and add.
It's worth pointing out the Migration Observatory, in their data they have looked at, shows that pull factors are basically irrelevant when it comes to asylum seekers, because, you know, there's not many pull factors for Saudi Arabia where they shoot you if you try and claim asylum. They still try it anyway, you know? But when you actually look at the numbers, when you try and be punitive and remove the so-called pull factors, it doesn't actually change people's destinations. They mostly go to places they have cultural ties with, countries that have an imperial past or a colonial past that's linked to the United Kingdom. They come to us because they're more likely to speak the language, more likely to have ties to the country, which is why they choose here. That's why you get lots of refugees from post-colonial British states, you know, in the UK, and you get ones from post-colonial French states going to France. It's why we have totally different sets of refugees in France and in the United Kingdom based upon those links. That is why people choose the countries that they choose to seek refuge in. And they seek refuge because they are being pushed away by war, by conflict, by persecution, etc., etc., etc. These pull factors have been shown when they have been changed, when they got rid of the right to work for asylum seekers. That's a Blair-era policy. That's not been a long-standing policy. That is only back to Tony Blair that asylum seekers couldn't work. The policy was set up originally to reduce the pull factors, and it didn't change anything. It didn't. All you have by refusing people the access to work in this country whilst their claim is being heard is more people living as wards of the state without contribution. And this is what people want, isn't it? You want people to contribute if they're migrants? Well, no, they don't care. They want asylum seekers to drown in the channel. That's what they care about. They want asylum seekers to die. That's all they care about, right? They don't care about the reality of asylum seekers' lives. They don't care about the reality of the belligerent wars overseas that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg have always supported, like they do in Iran, like they did with Iraq, like they do in Libya, in Syria, in Afghanistan and all those places, and they do not want to have to deal with the fallout from what happens when you destabilize these countries. And they do not want to take refugees regardless. Reducing the pull factors is pointless. If you really don't want refugees, Jacob, just leave the refugee convention. Stop pretending that you care about people and just let these people die. Because we all know that's what you actually care about. But unlike you, I actually care about refugees, and we should accept refugees if they come here. And if they do get here, if they do perilously journey here, however which way they get here, assuming they haven't got the ability to claim asylum overseas and have some kind of managed route to be able to get here to have their asylum claim heard, then we should not continually have them as wards of the state. We should allow them to work so that they can contribute, just like any other immigrant would do. And it's also worth pointing out, they are asylum seekers. It is not illegal to claim asylum.
Thinking of creating a new life and you're thinking of where to go, suddenly the UK will be an even more attractive place to go to than it.
I mean, it's not a particularly attractive place more broadly, but again, they're coming here because of cultural ties, because of historical ties, not necessarily because they think it's fucking land of bread and roses. Because we have lower numbers per capita than other countries. I wonder why.
It is already. So you will continue with that change in our culture as more people come in before those who are already here can be assimilated. Say you have drugs policy that would change our culture, prostitution policy devoid of morality, and an immigration policy that is utterly unrealistic and would be damaging to the whole structure of our nation.
But again, it would also be economically damaging to have his migration policy, because we would just have an aging society and our entire economy would be a fucking retirement home. But he's retired and he's rich as fuck. Why would he care? Why would he care about what happens if our productive capacity drops off a cliff and we are in permanent recession because we've closed the borders? But then again, it doesn't matter. He cares far more about having no brown people in this country than he does about the future of the economy and the future of the state, or indeed the future that I will have to live in as a young person in this country, or a semi-young person. I am 34 after all. A millennial, shall we say. There are real consequences to stopping migration, and they are all economic. And if we really want people to integrate, as I do, if we really want people to assimilate, as I do, we should put the funding in to help them do that. Norway does this, Sweden does this, countries all over the more normal side of Europe do this to try and make sure that refugees integrate. And we don't do this because of his stupid austerity policies. And again, just like everything else that he has said here, this is not new policy. This is not new policy. This was policy under all the previous leaders. This is not new to the party, because the members vote on policy and they voted on this stuff ages ago. Our support for migrants, our support for humane migration system long predates Zach Polanski's leadership of the Green Party and was well in place when Caroline Lucas was in charge. The idea this is somehow a new phenomenon is nonsense.
This is really dangerous stuff because people are voting for them without knowing any of this. All they seem to know is that the Greens are quite cuddly, that they're not Labour and they're not the Tories and they're not the slightly sharp-elbowed Reform. They're a gentle, kindly party, but their policies are fundamentally dangerous.
I mean, no, people are voting for us because they see our policies and we like our policies. Do you think we don't talk about our policies? We talk about green energy a lot. We talk about nationalisation a lot. We talk about rent control a lot. We talk about wealth taxes a lot. We talk about welfare increases a lot. We talk about humane migration policy a lot. We're not quiet about any of these things, and we haven't been for the last decade. We've consistently been a voice for internationalism, for socialism, for wealth redistribution, for workers' rights, and for a more liberal and tolerant society. That has never stopped being the case. But people are paying attention to us now because Zach Polanski has taken us into a more politically prominent position.
Their hostility to Israel is quite extraordinary. Their sympathy for the enemies of Israel is quite extraordinary.
And no, actually, people who dislike genocidal settler colonial lunatic states, as Finkelstein would describe them as, are normal. Hatred of Israel is normal. Most people in this country do not like Israel, Jacob. You are the weird one here.
I mentioned the mourning of the death of an Ayatollah, murderous
Again, this isn't true.
Ayatollah, is a peculiar position to be in. They are trying to establish a form of sectarian politics because they hope that some voters will overlook everything else.
And again, it's not sectarian to oppose genocide, to oppose settler colonialism, to oppose Zionism and Hinduism. Like, it's just nonsense. I've covered this previously on Novara Media. Go check out my work on the accusations of Green Party sectarianism.
Drugs, prostitution, mass migration because of their concern about Israel and Palestine. It is essentially an attempt to divide Britain in a sectarian way.
Us opposing genocide and opposing colonialism and sectarianism, yet him allowing Israel to be balls deep in his own fucking mouth. Apparently, that isn't sectarianism. His opposition to a bunch of things that people in the Asian diaspora in this country support, that's not sectarianism. His open support for Zionism apparently isn't sectarianism, but our opposition to it is. I wonder why.
Green is for danger. People need to be aware of this because I think the more people who know about the true risks of the Greens will not want to vote for them. We need sensible, stable, and actually moral government.
And again, it comes to moralisation rather than actual policy. But again, we don't have sensible or stable governance because the policies that you have supported for generations and the current government seems to not want to undo has caused the instability. Radical change is necessary to restore stability and to create a country that is actually functioning by making our country more equal again, more fair again, more tolerant again. That's the way we maintain stability. It is the instability of right-wing politics, of neoliberalism, of disaster capitalism, of, unironically, sectarian politics, of wanting to divide us based upon background rather than based upon shared material interests is why our country's up shit creek without a paddle, and it's down to you and your party, Jacob. So first of all, he was wrong about our policies being bad. He was wrong about our policies in some cases just factually, or the beliefs of our party members, and indeed he was wrong that these are new developments. These have always been Green Party policy, and maybe because you weren't fucking paying attention, it's because you're an idiot, Jacob. But then again, we all knew that.